Good morning, everyone. Um, I hope I can't see you joining or not, but I hope that you are joining us as we start this webinar today. My name is Elena Fernandez Lee. I am the Education Campaigns Manager at the Fairtrade Foundation, and I'm here today this morning to talk a little bit about fair trade in general, but tell you about our latest campaign, which is called Brew It Fair. And it's a campaign that we've been running for the last 6 months. And just last week, we handed in 22,000 signatures of people around the country that supported this presentation. We went to Downing Street to ask government to brew it fair. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our work today. So I have got a little agenda. This is just so you know what we'll be covering today. I'm going to start talking about fair trade. What is fair trade? Some of you might know, but it might not be so obvious to other people. Just a little bit about the basics about fair trade. Then we're going to be talking about the issues that farmers and workers are facing. Then I'm going to tell you a story. We've got a beautiful story about a fair trade farmer in Kenya. That's is really nice to put a face to the things I'm telling you about. We're going to talk about the benefits. I'm going to talk about the benefits of fair trade, the fair trade premium, and then how you can take action. So those are the things I'll be covering. I think it will last about 45 minutes. And after that, we're going to open the session for questions and answers. And also feel free to put any of your questions in the chat if you want to put them as I'm talking along. And then at the end, I can look at those and answer them for you. So first of all is what is fair trade? And I wonder, obviously, I know it's a webinar and I can't see you, but how many of you recognize that fair trade mark that's on the screen there? And I'll tell you a little bit more about it. We are an international movement, and we work in partnership with 2 million farmers and workers. And what we do is have a vision of a world in which producers enjoy a secure and sustainable livelihood, fulfill their potential, and decide for their future. We work with farmers in more than 1,900 cooperatives, and that is across 68 countries. And the whole idea is that workers can improve their living standard, invest in their communities and businesses, and protect our shared environment. Fair prices. So the key thing that people will know about fair trade is that we provide fair prices, fair salary. What they do is they provide an immediate lifeline for farmers and workers who are struggling with low income and disadvantaged historically by global trade. We do this in lots of different ways. We rally a global community of millions. So we obviously work with the farmers and workers, but we also work with supply chain partners, brands, retailers, shoppers, schools, universities, governments. And what we ask is that farmers and workers get paid fair prices and uphold fair production standards and practices. So that is sort of the basics of fair trade. We are a registered mark. And that means that any product that you see that has the mark on it is being produced, is actually met some really rigorous standards of production. The mask is used only on products that have got the fair trade standards or on promotional materials to encourage people to buy fair trade products. We recently did a bit of a market survey. An amazing 93% of UK shoppers recognise the fair trade mark, and 83% trust it when deciding if a product is ethical. And this is really good. We are the most recognised fair trade label across the world. So this is a really, really good thing to start working with. And today I'm going to tell you a little bit more about tea. I love tea. I can drink several cups a day. It keeps me going. And it's interesting actually because I'm originally from Spain. So in Spain, they tend to be more coffee drinkers, but I've always loved tea. And when we decided to go for this campaign, which was focusing on this commodity, I was really, really pleased because it's something I feel really strongly about. My cups of tea get me through the day often when I'm feeling down or whatever. So being able to appreciate the supply chain and the people that grew that tea for me, it was really important. So I've loved this campaign. I'll tell you some interesting facts about tea. All tea comes from the same plant. So whether it's black, green, or white, it all comes from the same plant, and that is a Camellia sinensis. It's actually the same family as the camellias, the decorative camellias that we have in the UK. They have big, normally pink flowers, very glossy leaves, and they flower very early in the year. So it's the same family. Obviously, the ones in the UK are hardy, and they will when we get freezing temperatures, they still carry on growing. The ones that we actually use for tea wouldn't survive in the UK. So actually, there are a couple of uh, tea plantations in different places. I think Cornwall, the weather in Cornwall is quite mild, so they have some tea that grows wildly there. But in general, it's not a plant that lives outside in the UK. A tea bush can take up to 4 years to mature since it's planted, and then it can produce leaves for over 50 years. Some tea plants can grow as tall as a house. Obviously, the ones that are used in plantations are kept small for easy picking. But if a tea plant grows in the wild, it can grow up to 9 meters tall. Tea pickers are very, very skilled. There's lots of mechanization happening in tea picking, but actually, tea pickers, the tea that's picked by people, is actually still the most effective and fastest way to collect tea. So that means that it's an industry that actually relies a lot on human labor. Um, we're going to talk a little bit about the supply chain. So, like with every product we have, it's got very complex supply chain. Um, it has multiple actors from pickers and growers to processors, auctioneers, wholesalers, packers, distributors, and retailers. Tea begins its life, as you can see here, I've got a picture of the Camellia sinensis. It's a small shrub which can be identified by green glossy leaves, a white flower, and it's got a yellow center. And the ideal climate for this variety is warm, humid conditions with well-distributed rainforest. And the way they pick it is the young, light green leaves are preferably harvested, and they harvest it every single day. So every day they will take a few leaves from every tree. Older leaves are deeper green, but they're not as good for tea. So they sort of focus on the actual younger leaves. The freshly plucked tea leaves must be processed within a few hours of being picked, or they will lose their quality and value. So large tea estates often have their own processing plant that's situated near a tea factory where the tea is processed. But very often farmers who do not have a direct relationship with factories may rely on middlemen who normally will pay them less for their tea. The tea is then shipped globally. Nearly 50% of the tea is produced in China. China is not actually one of the countries that we work with, but the others, which are India, Kenya, Sri Lanka, and Turkey, are countries that do actually have fair trade tea. And tea is also a significant industry in other countries. So Uganda, Malawi, Indonesia, and Bangladesh are also very big tea producers worldwide. The tea is sent to the country which has bought it. And for example, if it was the UK, it would make its way to the factory of the distributor, and there it's blended and packaged before making its way to the supermarket shelf and into the next cup of tea. So I was really lucky. I visited the Clipper Tea Factory. Clipper is a tea that I drink. It's Fairtrade, and their factory is in West Dorset. So it was beautiful to see. And they actually have lots of different teas. They obviously have the black tea, which is their like breakfast tea. They also sell lots of green teas, but they also have lots of herbal teas. So it was absolutely incredible to see how they were blending all the teas. So for example, they had the Earl Grey. The Earl Grey is black tea, but they are add bergamot. And the smells, it was incredible. Then they have teas like in this time of the year, it's quite nice to try it's called the Three Roots, and it's got ginger and turmeric, and it's really good. It's quite spicy, interestingly, but it's really good for your immune system. So if they use other products other than the tea, like for example, the ginger or cinnamon or anything like that, they will add to the other teas are also fair trade. And that was a lovely experience visiting. Um, and it is only as tea moves through the complex supply chain that the profits start to be seen. According to Oxfam, Out of every kilogram of packed Assam tea that is sold, tea brands and supermarkets take a sizable cut. So about 95% goes to them, while a marginal proportion, which normally is less than 5%, remains on tea estates or to pay workers. So, like most supply chains that we see, the profits are really being taken by the sort of the steps near the end, as opposed to the people who are actually probably putting more work into it by growing and picking the tea. So let's move to the next slide. So globally, tea production employs about 13 million people, and 9 million are smallholder producers responsible for roughly 60% of the tea that we consume. Its precious leaves are grown in two ways. First, on the large traditional estates or plantations, and these estates employ hundreds of people, and they cover the whole process from growing the tea to harvesting and processing in factories. So they have factories on site. The second way it's actually produced is grown by farmers on their own land, often operating as a family business, and sometimes they employ a few other workers. Fairtrade supports both hired labour organisations and smaller tea productions in 12 countries, and we primarily work in Sri Lanka, India, Kenya, and Malawi. Despite increasing mechanisation, tea production remains, as I said earlier, labour intensive and offers limited earning opportunities. The global tea trade is largely dominated by a small group of companies, which means smallholder tea farmers often find themselves in vulnerable positions with little negotiating power. There's several issues. I mean, this is the same with all supply chains, really, but there are several issues that are particularly pertinent to tea farmers and workers. The first one is living wages. Most workers picking tea on estate earn significantly below what is considered a living wage in their country. And in many cases, they receive income below the poverty line. The other one is working conditions. The production of tea often fails to take place in a safe and healthy working environment. The tea workers and farmers are facing several unique health and safety challenges. To give you an idea of the conditions here, I was speaking to a colleague of mine that was lucky enough to visit a tea farm in India. And he said that, first of all, the factory can be maybe miles away from where they're picking their tea. They're very big estates. So they often, as I said earlier, it's very, it needs to have a regular rainfall. So, and they also very often the tea grows on hills. So the workers are walking several miles in slippery hills to the tea plantation. You can see in the middle picture, they've got these big baskets. And when they are filled, those baskets, which they carry, as you can see in that image there, on their backs, can weigh up to 30 kilograms. So they walk back to wherever the tea is going to be collected, miles with 30 kilograms on their back in slippery slopes. Very often there are different wildlife, like the scorpions, apparently snakes, which can be quite dangerous. And also in the tea estate that this person visited, they said that at night time, and they also had attacks from larger wildlife. So, for example, if they were making their way back to the tea factory night after nightfall, tigers had been cases of tigers coming closer to the towns and villages and so on. So it's quite they are quite tedious working conditions. The third one I have here is climate mitigation. And as you know, climate change is affecting communities all around the world. Tea is a climate sensitive crop, and growing it is extremely labor intensive. It only grows well when it's warm and wet, limiting the tea harvesting season in many countries. Depends on irrigation. So as the weather changes, they're becoming more reliant on irrigation. And also, where the climate is changing, new pests are actually affecting these crops. And that obviously, all these issues are things that the farmers are having to deal with on top of the living wages and the working conditions. So one of the things that we like doing a lot is actually sharing stories of farmers, because it really helps us see what the issues are and how fair trade it works in these communities. So this is a story of Lina. Lina is a tea farmer in Kenya, and another colleague of mine visited her, and it was quite nice. Her story is quite nice in showing how fair trade works in farmers in these communities. So let me tell you a bit more about Lina's story. Um, Lynn is a farmer in the Fintea cooperative in Kenya. She is a mother of two. She has a son and a daughter. Her daughter's at university and her son now is an adult. She is a single mother and a widow. Her son graduated from Harvard University and she had the opportunity to travel to the US to attend his graduation a few years ago. Lina tells us that before joining the Fair Cooperative, her life was very difficult. She was very poor, and she says that she had no knowledge about farming or any education in leadership. But she received a lot of training for fair trade. She was taught financial management, good leadership, and many other things. After learning about financial management, she managed to make some savings. She explains that before women were not heard, but when fair trade came in to train them, women were given portions of tea plantations to manage and given land ownership, which had never happened before. She says, now we can speak as women, we can be heard, and we need to educate more women in our community. She said with further funding, they can make even more changes. Let me go to the next slide. Lynn is involved in the Gender Action Learning in Tea project, which is about supporting women tea producers that's been funded through Fairtrade. Lynn explains that her farm, that Fairtrade also taught her about climate change and its impact and how it's helped her to address some of the effects. For example, she no longer uses firewood for cooking. She uses biogas right from the cowshed and she has managed to collect water more efficiently. She's also using solar energy in her house, and she's had the opportunity to meet people that she teaches also about the effects of climate change. She was taught about diversification, and that's when she started dairy farming. She bought one calf to start off with, and now she has grown her offering. She now has two cows she milks. She also has 12 beehives, and she sells honey locally. She also has a few chickens and a goat. Lina says that she managed to do this because what she learned about fair trade. Apart from tea farming, she also has fruit trees on the farm like avocados and guavas. Lina tells us that tea farming nowadays is not like it used to be before, when she used to sell a lot of tea to fair trade. The tea pricing changes all the time, and she now sees that dairy farming is much better than tea farming. Having the cows really helped financially. For example, she says that having her cows is what helped her pay the school fees for her children. And now she even owns a car, which she can do all her errands with. So you can see her here. These are the cows that she now has, and you can see the beehive. I don't know if you can see the top left of the screen, but she also has beehives. So diversification has been really, really important for Lina, and that's something that Fairtrade really works with. The people that are trained in Fairtrade really focus on diversification because they see that having incomes that come from different places very often supports these households and communities. So these are the benefits of fair trade. We work on three main, well, actually, there's one missing here, but the key thing that you will know is the minimum price. So the fair trade minimum price defines the lowest possible price that a buyer of fair products must pay the producer. The minimum price is set based on a consultative process with the fair trade farmers in a specific countries and even in a specific areas. They talk to farmers, workers, traders, and it guarantees that producer groups will receive a price which covers its cost to grow the crop. When the market price is higher, it's fabulous. The farmers get the higher price. But when the market price falls beneath the minimum price, the fair trade farmers continue to receive the minimum price, which is not a luxury. It's not like, oh, they're going to live really well. Actually, sometimes the minimum price is still very, very low. And some of these farmers are still bordering poverty line, but it's definitely better than the the lower prices that other farmers could be selling their product for. The other thing that Fairtrade is very good at is at sharing cooperative training and knowledge. As Lina was explaining earlier, They work in cooperatives, which are groups of farmers and workers that come together to collectively grow, produce, and sell their products. When fair trade cooperatives receive training in anything from agroecology techniques to leadership of financial management, the knowledge doesn't just stop on one person. It is passed on through peer-to-peer learning and workshops, enabling everyone in the cooperative to benefit from that learning. This means that they can adapt to challenges such as climate resilience or improving crop quality and yield. So it's a really big aspect. The cooperative way of working of fair trade is a really important aspect of it. The last one here is a fair trade premium. So the fair trade premium is what makes fair trade unique. It's an additional sum of money that goes straight to the farmers and workers in the communities on top of the minimum price, and they can use it on any project of their choice. It can be an environmental project, it can be a social project, it can be anything that will improve the community. They decide democratically by committee how they invest the premium. So, for example, in this community, they were affected by a disease a few years prior, and there was lots of children that were left orphaned. So what they did in this community, in this cooperative, is that they used the fair trade premium to look after these children, to give them pay for their education, and that has really benefited the wider community. In the community I was telling you earlier in Kenya, one of the things that they did, so this was a really big farm, and there was obviously lots of workers, very often migrant workers, but there wasn't adequate schooling. So the children either had to live with relatives in villages, towns nearby that had a school, or alternatively, they had to take buses that took hours to get to their local school. So that community cooperative decided that their premium money was going to be spent in building a school in the farm, and that meant all the children could actually stay with their parents and not have to travel long hours in trains, in buses to get to school. The other thing they did is it was the same for the teachers. They built some accommodation so teachers could actually live on the farm. And that meant that teachers didn't have to do a massive commute at the end and at the beginning, at the end of the day. This was a really big estate in India, and they also provided a little minibus that collects the children because they obviously are very spread out, and some of them will still have to walk quite fast. There's a little minibus that picks them up. Also, they've invested quite a lot of money on lighting, street lighting. So that means that they're more likely if there's any wildlife coming to the towns or villages in the night, they are more likely to see it, and also as a deterrent for wildlife coming closer to them. So these are ways in which they can spend the premium. So Linus also had a few things, she had a few things to add about the fair trade premium and how purchasing fair trade products in the UK has helped her personally. She's told us that without fair trade, farming would be very difficult because we would not benefit from any training, from premium money, which has really helped the community. There are some kids who are orphaned, some of the fair trade premium has been used to support these children. I did mention that story earlier. And she also says that I am asking everyone in the UK to buy more of our tea so that farmers can benefit. We're happy to see most of our tea on your shelves and supermarkets because we know the ones that you take a lot of tea, to your shelves, much will come to our community. Um, I do have a lovely film. This has been a really popular film, but I tried, it's always a little bit tricky playing videos from a Zoom. And I tried earlier and the sound wasn't coming through. And then there's also a bit of a delay with the images. So we have popped the link in the chat. So what I would recommend is that after this talk that you could maybe have a look at it and yeah, just see for yourselves. So let me move on to the next slide now. So something that's really important to us, this is how fair trade works, and it's important for us to sort of talk about how we can make a difference here in the UK. So how can you brew at fair trade? So obviously a very obvious way here is buying fair trade tea. Together we can send a clear message to companies that we demand change for the people behind the tea we drink. Exists on UK shelves because shoppers have demanded fairer, more ethical choices. But the work isn't done. We need to keep on pressure, choosing fair trade, creating a fairer a future for the people behind the tea we drink. So as I said earlier, we have been running a campaign. It's called Brew It Fair, and actually we're closing it shortly. We're closing it in December, but you can still add your voice. It's a petition to the UK government. And what we're asking is that they introduce a human rights and environmental due diligence law that protects farmers and workers, tackles unfair purchasing practices, and supports living incomes and wages in the tea sector. Um, we've also asked the government to support multi-stakeholder collaborations by convening a roundtable with government, businesses, and representatives of tea workers and farmers to address long-standing challenges. The other ask that we have is that they restore the aid budget to 0.5% of the GNI and honour climate finance commitments, ensuring tea farmers and workers can adapt to climate change and building resilience. So the situation is that climate change is affecting the people or the countries that have done the least to contribute towards it the most. And that's the reason why countries like the UK that have contributed a lot to the climate crisis do need to honour the climate finance commitments. Um, so this is a lovely one. And I mean, I don't know how many of you are tea drinkers, but brew yourself a delicious cup of Fairtrade tea. In the UK, there are more than 400 Tasty Fairtrade certified teas, um, all types. So we have the everyday and premium to white, green, infusions, decaf, organic, and something, a bit of a misconception that lots of people often talk about, and it's not a misconception. Obviously, ethical products do have a higher price tag. It's inevitable because what it means is that people are not being exploited, the environment is not being exploited. That comes at a cost. But actually, we're really lucky in the UK that lots of our big brands are really committed to fair trade. And because they're so big, they can actually buy really large volumes. So to give you an example, Sainsbury's Red Label, the Co-op's own tea, also, Waitrose and Marks and Spencer's own brands actually use fair trade tea. And what you will find is that these, particularly the red label for Sainsbury's and the Co-op's own, these teas are fair trade, which means they are working with farmers and protecting the environment, and they have a lower price tag than some of the other brands, bigger brands that are not fair trade. So fair trade tea doesn't have to be more expensive. Just to give you an idea, I spoke earlier about Clipper, but Co-op or Greggs, this is something that's really, and actually when I visited Wales, I live in the south of the UK. I live in near Bournemouth actually. So recently, well, in this year in 25, me and my daughter went to Cardiff. And one thing that really struck us was how many Greggs there were in comparison to how many we have in the south of England. I'm told that in the north of England there's lots of Greggs. But I don't know if you know, Greggs is absolutely one of our fair trade superstars. All of their tea, coffee, and chocolate and orange juice that they serve is fair trade. The cups of coffee are really, really good, and they're such a good company. Obviously, the sausage rolls and other pastry. Actually, if there's chocolate in their bakery, it is fair trade, and the sugar is as well. Actually, maybe not the sausage rolls. So Greggs, a very affordable, good example of ethical company. Other ones like Hampstead tea, lemonade. Lemonade does cold drinks, but it does use like it's like Lipton kind of style tea. Lidl has quite a few. Lidl is another really interesting company actually because Lidl and Aldi, and this is surprising to lots of people, are some of the biggest cocoa, fair trade cocoa or chocolate retailers in the UK. And they're obviously discount supermarkets. So again, really affordable prices. So you're not paying more. And there's lots of, it's incredible. I went to Lidl and their sort of Christmas range, they have lots of like almonds coated in chocolate, panettones, all these things actually are using fair trade sugar and cocoa, which is fabulous. National Trust also has tea, sugar, coffee, all their refreshments are fair trade. Sainsbury's, Waitrose, amongst others. As I said earlier, there is actually around 400 different teas available. So these are just some of our bigger names, but you can find fair trade tea in lots of different places. And a really interesting number here. So obviously the fair trade farmers are not only getting the minimum wage, but I mentioned earlier the fair trade premium. And I know this is a bit old, this data now, but just to give you an idea, that in 2022, a fair trade tea sales generated 3.5 million pounds in fair trade premium. And this is the money that is going to those projects and make such a difference. So they can be, for example, some of the projects could be reforestation projects. So lots of trees are being planted using this fair trade premium. Lighting for rural areas, schools, lots of the fair trade premium very often is used in getting clean water to rural communities, medical centres, in the community I was telling you about earlier in Kenya, they have also built a medical center using the premium. So it really is money that goes straight into these communities and it's making a massive difference. So I think that's me done. And I know it's only taken me 32 minutes, but that's great because it means that we've got lots of time to ask questions and hopefully you'll have some questions and I can answer some of those for you. If you have any further questions, I have got our email address there. And I also suggest that you have a look in our website because we've got lots of different resources and much more information there. So I'm going to stop sharing. And that's great because you might be able to see me a bit better now. And but please mute yourself if Sarah can unmute people and maybe you can ask me some questions, maybe about other commodities. Um, I was telling Sarah earlier, I look after all the schools across the UK, and actually Wales is one of our strongest areas with lots and lots of schools committed to fair trade. And the reason why is because the government is very committed to global citizenship, and it's recognised quite strongly in the curriculum, which is fantastic because it means schools, by being a fair trade school, it really aligns with the curriculum and they can actually achieve lots of the targets that the curriculum aims for them to complete. So any questions at all, please, you can put them in the chat and I can answer them. Oh, I've got one. Thank you, Afra. How fair trade helps farmers if the buyers pay less? So I think in general, fair trade, uh, well, it's first of all, something that we are really, really keen in doing is we fair trade, we don't help the farmers. The farmers are fair trade. The way I see it is I work for those farmers. I'm like the person in the UK that works for those farmers to put their case forward. So we don't consider that we're not like a charity. We are not doing this work. We are a union of people across the world that are actually trying to promote fairer trading. But buyers don't pay less. I mean, all I'm saying is that, for example, some of the tea brands have really priced up. They're not fair trade. They're not paying a minimum wage to their workers, nor a premium. And yet they're charging more for that tea. So more profits are being made there. But the fair trade system ensures that farmers are getting a minimum wage, which is not always enough. I'm not saying that that's the perfect solution. We would like our minimum wage to be even higher, but equally we need market access and we need people to be buying our tea. So we can't make it the real price. If you really valued it, it would be far too expensive for any of us to actually to buy. So, but all I'm saying is that brands like the brands like the I don't know what you call them, supermarket owned, very often are the fair trade ones are very competitively priced. And you know that the money is going to the farmers. I don't know, Afra, if that's answered your question. Hopefully it has. Oh yes, but I can also see in question and answer some more coming. Yes, Tamara, we do have a list on our website of all companies that are fair trade. And we also at the moment have, if you go, we also have a really nice blog about Christmas products that are fair trade. So both of those you'll be able to find. We have actually we call it a buying guide, and it's a updated document that you can find on our website, which has all the companies and it's got all the commodities. So just to give you an idea, the commodities that we have, the ones that everyone is really familiar with are bananas, coffee, and chocolate, actually. They're the sort of three bigger ones. Tea, we've been pushing a lot this year, but also tea. Flowers are really interesting because they're really growing ourselves, and flowers is one of the products we are really, really focusing on. And there are loads of different companies that are selling it now. For example, um, Co-op and Aldi, I think, and also Lidl. Their roses are coming from Fairtrade farmers in Kenya. And what's really interesting is obviously there's flowers, the flowers that are the ones that we have in the UK in the summer are brilliant, and we also encourage you to buy locally. But actually, the roses that come from Kenya that are fair trade have a lower carbon footprint than the ones that are grown in Europe. So not only they are the farmers are getting fair wages and a premium, but also they're more environmentally friendly. So, and then we have lots of other things. For example, shea butter is a big one. Cotton. Lots of schools have fair trade uniform. I was saying earlier that we have a couple of fair trade universities in um in Wales, Swansea, and I think it's Swansea and Bangor, and they have they do lots of work with fair trade merchandise for their university shops. And things like gold is interesting because most products are edibles. Also lots of wine. I mean, the wine is really building. Is quite one of the products that we're really growing. But if you go to any supermarket nowadays, you can see fair trade wine normally coming from South Africa, Argentina, Chile. So lots of different products to choose from. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.